You're not welcome here, Olivia. My mother's voice sliced through the hushed murmur of mourners gathered outside the funeral home. I stood frozen on the steps, clutching the flowers I'd driven 3 hours to deliver, my father's favorite white roses. She blocked the doorway, her expression cold and unmoving. Behind her, I could see guests turning to watch, their faces a mixture of shock and uncomfortable curiosity. Mom, what are you talking about? It's Dad's funeral. You didn't contribute enough, she said, her words measured and deliberate. You weren't here when he needed you. You don't get to show up now and play the grieving daughter. The roses trembled in my hands. Around us, whispers rippled through the crowd. My cousin Angela looked away. My father's business partner, Mr. Stevens, shifted uncomfortably. Daniel, my golden child brother, stood behind our mother with his arms crossed, nodding in agreement. I was here. I managed, my voice breaking. I visited him every week. I paid for his medications when insurance wouldn't cover them. But she'd already turned away, dismissing me like I was nothing. The heavy oak doors closed in my face. I stood there, humiliated, as the funeral began without me. Through the stained glass windows, I could hear the opening hymn. My father's hymn. And I wasn't allowed inside to say goodbye. Something shifted inside me in that moment. Not sadness. Not even anger. Something colder, sharper, more focused. My mother had made a terrible miscalculation. My name is Olivia Clark. I'm 33 years old, and until that moment, I had spent my entire life trying to earn my mother's approval, trying to be visible in a family that treated me like a shadow. But standing on those steps, locked out of my own father's funeral, I realized something crucial. I was done trying. And I was done being invisible. I didn't cry on the drive home. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but no tears came. The white roses sat in the passenger seat, slowly wilting in the afternoon heat. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from relatives who'd witnessed what happened. I ignored them all. 3 hours stretched into an eternity as I replayed my mother's words over and over. You didn't contribute enough. The accusation was absurd. For the past 5 years, I'd been the one visiting Dad every Sunday without fail. I'd taken him to doctor's appointments when Mom claimed she was too busy. I'd researched treatment options, talked to specialists, held his hand through the worst days. When his medication costs skyrocketed, I'd quietly covered the difference, never asking for recognition or repayment. I'd done it because I loved him, not because I wanted credit. But Daniel, who lived 20 minutes away and visited maybe twice a year, was standing beside Mom like the devoted son. Daniel, who forgot Dad's birthday 3 years running. Daniel, who only called when he needed money. Somehow, in my mother's narrative, he was the good child and I was the neglectful one. The unfairness of it burned in my chest like acid. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at nothing. My neighbors probably thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Everything I'd believed about my family had shattered in the space of 5 minutes on those funeral home steps. I'd known Mom favored Daniel. I'd lived with that reality my entire life. But this was different. This was erasure. This was her rewriting history to cast me as the villain in a story where I'd done nothing wrong. My phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I answered, curious what excuse he'd offer. Liv, Mom asked me to call, he said, his tone apologetic but not sincere. She thinks you should respect her wishes and stay away from the burial tomorrow. You made things awkward today. I hung up without responding and blocked his number. Then I called the one person who would understand. My father's attorney. Stuart Garrison had been Dad's lawyer for 20 years. I'd met him a handful of times at family gatherings, remembered him as sharp-minded and fair. When I called that evening, he answered immediately. Olivia, he said, his voice warm but cautious. I heard about what happened today. I'm sorry. Those simple words of acknowledgement nearly broke me. I need to ask you something, I said, steadying my voice. About Dad's will. There was a long pause. Your mother hasn't contacted me yet about executing the will, Stuart said carefully. But your father updated it 6 months ago. He was very specific about his intentions. My heart started pounding. What do you mean specific? Stuart cleared his throat. I can't disclose details until after the burial, but I think you should know that your father was aware of certain family dynamics. He made provisions accordingly. I sat down heavily on my couch. Did he know Mom would try to cut me out? Stuart's silence was answer enough. Your father loved you very much, Olivia. He talked about you often. About your visits, your care, your dedication. He wanted to make sure you were protected. Protected. The word echoed in my mind. Protected from what? From whom? From my own mother? We agreed to meet at his office 2 days after the burial. I thanked him and ended the call, my mind racing. Dad had known. He'd seen how Mom treated me, how she elevated Daniel and diminished me at every opportunity. And he'd done something about it. For the first time since being turned away from the funeral, I felt something other than pain. I felt hope. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times Dad had squeezed my hand during hospital visits, the way he'd smiled when I brought him his favorite books to read. You're the strong one, Livy, he'd told me once near the end. Don't let anyone make you forget that. At the time, I'd thought he was just being encouraging. Now I wondered if it had been a warning. The burial happened without me. I didn't try to attend. Instead, I spent that morning going through every document I had related to Dad's care, organizing receipts, medical bills, payment confirmations. 5 years of evidence showing exactly how much I'd contributed, not just financially but in time and presence and love. If Mom wanted to claim I'd done nothing, I'd have facts to prove otherwise. My apartment became a makeshift war room. I spread everything across my dining table, creating a timeline of Dad's illness and my involvement. Hospital visits logged in my calendar app. Prescription receipts with my credit card number. Text messages where Dad thanked me for my help. Email chains with doctors discussing treatment options. The paper trail was extensive and damning to Mom's narrative. Around noon, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Olivia? It's Angela. My cousin's voice was hushed, like she was hiding somewhere. I needed to call you. What your mom did was wrong. I closed my eyes, grateful for at least one ally. Thank you for saying that. Angela took a breath. There's more. At the burial, your mom was talking to Daniel about the house. Your dad's house. She's planning to sell it immediately and split the proceeds with Daniel. Just the two of them. My stomach dropped. She can't do that. Not before the will is read. Angela's voice dropped even lower. She said something about how possession is 9/10 of the law. She's moving fast, Liv. I thought you should know. I thanked Angela and hung up, my mind spinning. Mom was trying to liquidate Dad's assets before anyone could stop her. It was fraud, plain and simple, but she was betting I wouldn't fight back. She'd spent my whole life training me not to make waves, not to challenge her authority. I called Stuart immediately. He listened to what Angela had told me, then spoke in his careful lawyer voice. Can you meet me at your father's house in an hour? I need to secure some documents before they disappear. We agreed to meet there. As I grabbed my keys, I realized this was it. The moment where I stopped being the dutiful, invisible daughter and started fighting for what was right. Mom had declared war. She just didn't know I was ready to fight back. Dad's house looked the same as always. The small brick ranch with the neat lawn I'd helped him maintain. Stuart was already there when I arrived, standing beside his Mercedes. Your father gave me a spare key, he explained, holding it up. For emergencies. I'd say this qualifies. We walked to the front door together. My hands were shaking slightly, but I kept my voice steady. Is this legal? Going in without Mom's permission? Stuart inserted the key. I'm the executor of your father's estate. It's not just legal, it's my responsibility to secure important documents and prevent any assets from being misappropriated before probate. The house smelled like Dad, like coffee and old books and the lemon cleaner he always used. It hurt to breathe in that familiar scent, knowing he was gone. But there was no time for grief. Stuart headed straight for Dad's study. The room was exactly as Dad had left it. His reading glasses on the desk. A half-finished crossword puzzle. Photos on the wall, mostly of me and Daniel as kids, but more recent ones too. I noticed several pictures of just me and Dad from recent years. At his hospital bedside. At his favorite restaurant. At the park where we'd walk together. None of Daniel. Mom had always controlled the family photo albums, curating the narrative of our perfect family. But here in Dad's private space, the truth was different. Stuart began methodically photographing documents, starting with financial statements. "Your father was very organized," he murmured, pulling folders from a filing cabinet. Bank statements, property deeds, investment accounts, all clearly labeled and documented. I watched him work, feeling increasingly uneasy. "What are you looking for specifically?" Stuart glanced at me. "Evidence of what your father owned at the time of his death. And evidence of any unusual transactions in the months before." He pulled out a thick folder labeled Property and Assets, and his expression changed. "Olivia, look at this." He handed me a bank statement from 3 months ago. There was a wire transfer for $75,000. Outgoing. To an account I didn't recognize. "What is this?" I asked. Stuart's jaw tightened. "That's what we need to find out. But if I had to guess, someone was moving money out of your father's accounts while he was sick." We both knew who that someone was. My mother had been stealing from my dying father. We spent 2 hours in Dad's study, photographing documents and creating an inventory of everything valuable in the house. Stuart worked with methodical precision, explaining each step to me. "If your mother tries to sell anything or move any assets, we'll have proof of what existed at the time of your father's death," he said. "This protects everyone's interests." But mainly, I understood, it protected mine. I found something disturbing in Dad's desk drawer. A letter, addressed to me in Dad's handwriting, sealed but never sent. My hands trembled as I held it. "Should I open this?" Stuart nodded. "It's addressed to you. That makes it yours." I carefully tore the envelope and pulled out 2 pages of Dad's neat script. The date at the top was from 4 months ago, when he'd still been well enough to write. "My dearest Olivia," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I suspect your mother has made things difficult for you. I'm writing this because I need you to know the truth about several things." My eyes blurred with tears, but I kept reading. Dad explained how he'd noticed Mom moving money from their accounts. How he'd confronted her and she claimed it was for future expenses, but refused to provide details. How he'd changed his will to protect me because he knew she would try to cut me out. "Your mother has always favored Daniel," Dad wrote. "I've made excuses for it over the years, told myself it would balance out eventually. But I've watched how hard you've tried to earn her love, and how she dismisses your efforts. It breaks my heart. You deserve better than the scraps of affection she tosses your way. You've been more of a partner to me in these final years than she ever was. Don't let her make you feel small, Livy. You're worth 10 of Daniel." The letter went on to detail specific accounts and assets he wanted me to know about. A savings account in his name only with nearly $200,000. Stock investments worth another $150,000. The house, which he'd owned before marrying Mom and had kept solely in his name. "All of this should come to you," he wrote. "I've made sure of it in my will. But your mother will fight. She always does when she doesn't get her way. Be strong, sweetheart. You have every right to what's yours." I looked up at Stuart, tears streaming down my face. She knew. Mom knew he was leaving everything to me. And that's why she's been moving money. She's been stealing from him because she knew the will wouldn't favor her. Stuart's expression was grim. "We'll need to trace those transfers. If your mother took money that was meant to be part of the estate, she'll have to return it. With interest." He paused. "This letter changes everything. It's evidence of your father's intent, and your mother's knowledge of that intent." That evening, I sat in my apartment rereading Dad's letter over and over, memorizing every word. He'd seen me. Really seen me. All those years I'd felt invisible, Dad had been paying attention. He'd noticed my efforts, my care, my love. And he'd tried to protect me from Mom's cruelty even after death. The grief hit me then, finally. Not gentle sadness but wrenching, gut-deep sobs that left me gasping. I cried for the father I'd lost and the mother I'd never really had. When I could breathe again, I texted Angela. "Thank you for the warning. Found some things at Dad's house. Mom's in deeper trouble than she knows. Angela responded immediately. Good. Someone needs to stand up to her. She's been telling everyone you abandoned your dad, making herself look like a martyr. That stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. Mom was building a narrative where she was the devoted wife, and I was the neglectful daughter. Time to dismantle that story with facts. The next morning, I met Stuart at his office. He'd spent the evening reviewing the documents we'd collected. I've traced that $75,000 transfer, he said, sliding a paper across his desk. It went to an account in your mother's name, opened 3 months ago at a different bank. I stared at the paper. She opened a secret account while Dad was dying and moved his money into it. Stuart nodded. And there's more. I found 2 other transfers. Smaller amounts, but they add up. In total, your mother moved nearly $100,000 out of your father's accounts in the 3 months before his death. My hands clenched into fists. Can we prove she didn't have his permission? Stuart smiled grimly. Your father's letter helps. But even better, I contacted the bank. The transfers were initiated online using your mother's login credentials. Your father never used online banking. He always came into the branch in person. This was it. Hard evidence of theft. What happens now? Stuart leaned back in his chair. Now we read the will. Officially. I've scheduled a formal reading for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Your mother and Daniel will be there. I've sent them both certified letters, so they can't claim they didn't know. My stomach twisted with anxiety. She's going to explode. Stuart's expression was serious. Let her. The law is on your side, Olivia. Your father made his wishes very clear, and your mother's actions only strengthen your position. I drove home feeling like I was preparing for battle. In a way, I was. Tomorrow, Mom would discover that her schemes had failed, that Dad had outsmarted her, that I wasn't going to disappear quietly like she'd planned. My phone rang. Daniel's number, calling from a different phone since I'd blocked his original one. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. What? I said coldly. Daniel's voice was tight with anger. Mom just got some letter from Dad's lawyer. About a will reading. What did you do? I didn't do anything, I replied calmly. Dad made his own decisions. If you're worried about what's in his will, maybe you should have visited him more often while he was alive. Daniel's voice rose. You always do this. You always make everything about you. Mom's devastated, and you're making it worse by stirring up legal trouble. I laughed, a harsh sound. Legal trouble? Dad's lawyer is reading Dad's will. That's not trouble, Daniel. That's procedure. Unless you're worried about what it says. The silence on the other end told me everything. Mom had told Daniel they'd inherit everything together. She'd promised him his share. And now he was realizing that maybe things weren't going to go according to Mom's plan. See you tomorrow, I said and ended the call. Then I blocked this number too. Whatever Daniel wanted to say, I didn't need to hear it. Tomorrow's will reading would do all the talking necessary. Stuart's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my best professional outfit, wanting to look composed and unshakable. Stuart greeted me warmly and led me to a conference room. Your mother and brother haven't arrived yet, he said. Are you ready for this? I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The truth was, my heart was pounding and my hands felt cold, but I wasn't going to back down. Mom and Daniel arrived exactly at 2 p.m. Mom looked elegant as always, dressed in black with pearls, playing the grieving widow perfectly. Her expression shifted from composed to angry the moment she saw me. What is she doing here? Mom demanded, pointing at me like I was an intruder. Stuart's voice was professionally cool. Olivia is named in your husband's will. She has every right to be present. Daniel sat down heavily, looking uncomfortable. Mom remained standing, glaring at me. This is inappropriate. After the way she behaved at the funeral, showing up uninvited, making a scene. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Stuart interrupted. Mrs. Clark, please sit down so we can proceed. Mom finally sat, her back rigid with anger. Stuart opened a leather folder and pulled out several documents. This is the last will and testament of Marcus James Clark. Stuart began formally. Executed 6 months ago and properly witnessed. Mom's eyes narrowed. 6 months ago Dad had still been relatively healthy, still making his own decisions without her interference. Stuart continued. I'll summarize the key provisions. First, Marcus left all his personal effects, his books, his watches, his collection of photography equipment, to his daughter Olivia Clark. That was unexpected. Those items had sentimental value more than monetary, but the fact that Dad had specifically left them to me meant something. Stuart went on. Second, Marcus left his 2019 Toyota Camry to his son Daniel Clark. Daniel perked up slightly. A car was something, at least. But I noticed Mom's expression growing darker as she realized where this was heading. Stuart paused, looking at Mom directly. Third, Marcus left to his wife Helen Clark the sum of $50,000 to be paid from his savings account. The silence that followed was deafening. $50,000. That was it. Out of an estate worth several $100,000, Mom was getting $50,000. That's impossible, Mom said, her voice sharp. There must be a mistake. I'm his wife. Community property means I get half of everything. Stuart shook his head slightly. In this state, Mrs. Clark, the house was your husband's separate property, acquired before marriage and never converted to joint ownership. The same is true of most of his financial accounts. He had the legal right to distribute those assets as he saw fit. Mom stood up abruptly. This is fraud. That's what this is. Olivia manipulated him while he was sick, turned him against his own wife. Stuart's expression remained neutral. Mrs. Clark, your husband was evaluated by 2 doctors 6 months ago. Both certified he was of sound mind and capable of making his own decisions. Those evaluations are part of the file. He turned to the next page. Fourth and finally, Marcus James Clark left the remainder of his estate, including his house, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, and any other assets not specifically mentioned, to his daughter Olivia Clark. The words hung in the air. Everything. Dad had left me everything except those few specific bequests to Daniel and Mom. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what this meant. Mom's face had turned an alarming shade of red. No, she said flatly. Absolutely not. I'll contest this. I'll fight it. That girl doesn't deserve anything. Stuart's voice remained calm but firm. You're welcome to contest the will, Mrs. Clark. But I should inform you that doing so will likely be unsuccessful and expensive. Daniel found his voice. There has to be some mistake. Dad wouldn't cut Mom out like this. Stuart looked at him steadily. Your father left your mother $50,000. That's hardly cutting her out. But he made very specific choices about where the bulk of his estate should go, and he had sound reasons for those choices. Mom grabbed her purse. This isn't over. Come on, Daniel. We're leaving. She stormed toward the door, but Stuart's next words stopped her cold. Mrs. Clark, there's one more thing you should know. We've discovered unauthorized transfers from your husband's accounts totaling nearly $100,000. Money moved to an account in your name without proper authorization. Mom froze in the doorway. Slowly, she turned back to face Stuart, her expression shifting from anger to something harder to read. Fear, maybe, or calculation. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Stuart opened another folder. I have bank records showing 3 separate transfers from Marcus's account to an account opened in your name 3 months ago. The transfers occurred while your husband was hospitalized and unable to access online banking. Daniel looked at Mom with confusion. Mom, what is he talking about? Mom's jaw tightened. Your father gave me access to his accounts. For household expenses. That money was for bills for his care. Stuart shook his head. The account you transferred the money to was not used for any household expenses or medical bills. In fact, it appears you were stockpiling funds, perhaps anticipating that the will might not favor you. I watched Mom's face, saw the exact moment she realized she'd been caught. All her careful planning, her secret moves, exposed in Stuart's precise lawyer language. This is ridiculous, Mom tried again. I was protecting our assets. Olivia was trying to manipulate Marcus. I had to secure our future. Stuart's expression was almost pitying. Mrs. Clark, your husband left a letter explaining his decisions. He was aware of the transfers. He documented them. And he explicitly stated they were unauthorized. Mom's eyes flew to me. You put him up to this. You turned my husband against me. I met her gaze steadily, refusing to look away. I didn't do anything, Mom. Dad made his own choices. Maybe if you'd spent less time stealing from him and more time actually caring for him, things would be different. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't regret them. Mom deserved to hear the truth. Stuart continued. As executor of the estate, I'm obligated to recover those funds. Mrs. Clark, you have two options. You can voluntarily return the $100,000 you took, or I can file suit to recover it. Either way, that money belongs to the estate. Mom's face had gone pale now. You can't prove I didn't have permission. Stuart pulled out another document. Actually, I can. Marcus wrote a detailed letter explaining the unauthorized transfers, dated and witnessed. It's admissible in court. Daniel had been silent, processing everything. Now he spoke up, his voice uncertain. Mom, is this true? Did you really take Dad's money without telling him? Mom whirled on him. Don't you turn on me too. Everything I did was for us, for our family. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, Mom. Everything you did was for you. It was the first time I'd ever heard Daniel challenge her, and from the shock on Mom's face, she'd never expected it either. Stuart stood, signaling the meeting was ending. Mrs. Clark, I'll need your decision about returning the funds within 72 hours. If I don't hear from you, I'll proceed with legal action. Mom grabbed her purse again, her movements jerky with barely controlled rage. This isn't over, she hissed at me. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'm your mother. You owe me. I stood up slowly, meeting her eyes. I don't owe you anything. Not anymore. After Mom and Daniel left, I sat in the conference room feeling shell-shocked. Stuart poured me a glass of water and sat down across from me. That went about as well as could be expected, he said quietly. I laughed, but it came out slightly hysterical. She looked like she wanted to kill me. Stuart's expression was serious. She's going to fight this, Olivia. You need to be prepared for that. I took a sip of water, trying to steady myself. What can she actually do? You said the will was solid. Stuart nodded. It is. But your mother can file a contest, claim undue influence or mental incapacity. It would drag things out, cost money in legal fees, make everything more complicated. I thought about that. But we'd win eventually? Stuart's voice was confident. Yes. Your father took every precaution. The will is airtight. But the process could be unpleasant. More unpleasant than being uninvited from my own father's funeral? I asked. Stuart's expression softened. Fair point. We spent the next hour going over practical matters. The house was now legally mine, pending probate. The bank accounts would be transferred once everything was processed. I could expect to inherit somewhere around $350,000 total, minus the bequests to Mom and Daniel, and minus any estate taxes. It was more money than I'd ever had, life-changing money. But that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that Dad had seen me, had valued me, had made sure I was taken care of. Your father also left instructions about his personal papers, Stuart said, pulling out one final envelope. He wanted you to have these immediately. Inside were more letters, Dad's handwriting filling pages and pages. Letters he'd written to me over the past year, but never sent. Love letters, in a way. Letters telling me he was proud of me, that he saw my strength, that he knew Mom treated me unfairly. I clutched the letters to my chest, tears finally coming. Stuart gave me privacy, stepping out of the conference room. I sat there reading Dad's words, feeling his love reaching across death to hold me up. You're going to be fine, Livy, one letter said. Better than fine. You're going to thrive. Don't let your mother's bitterness poison your future. You're free now. Free. I hadn't realized how trapped I'd felt until that moment. When I finally composed myself, Stuart came back in. Take all the time you need, he said. But there's one more thing you should know. Your father set aside $10,000 specifically for you to use for therapy or counseling. He wanted to make sure you had support for dealing with your family dynamics. That almost broke me again. Even dying, Dad had been thinking about my well-being, my healing. What had I done to deserve a father who loved me so completely? That night, my phone exploded with messages. Daniel called 4 times. Angela texted asking if I was okay. Even some of Mom's friends reached out, their messages carefully neutral, fishing for information about what had happened at the will reading. I ignored most of them, but I did call Angela back. It's all over the family grapevine, Angela said. Your mom's telling everyone you stole your inheritance. I wasn't surprised. Mom would never admit she'd been caught stealing, or that Dad had chosen to leave his estate to me. She'd rewrite the story to make herself the victim, and me the villain. Let her talk, I said tiredly. Anyone who knows the truth knows I didn't do anything wrong. Angela was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, Liv, I'm proud of you. You stood up to her. That takes guts. After we hung up, I sat on my couch reading through Dad's letters again. One passage stood out. Your mother has always needed someone to blame for her own unhappiness. Don't let that person be you anymore. You've spent too many years trying to earn love that was never really available. There's nothing wrong with you, Olivia. The problem has always been her inability to see your worth. Dad had understood. He'd seen the dynamic I'd been trapped in since childhood. I pulled out my laptop and started making lists. Things I needed to do. Change locks on Dad's house, set up estate account, meet with financial advisor, schedule therapy appointment. Practical steps toward securing what Dad had left me. But I also made another list. Things I needed to do for myself. Reconnect with old friends I'd lost touch with, take that photography class I'd always wanted, maybe adopt a dog. Things that had nothing to do with the inheritance, and everything to do with building a life Mom couldn't touch. Around midnight, Daniel texted from yet another number. Liv, we need to talk. What Mom did was wrong, but she's still our mother. Can't we work something out? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I'm not negotiating what Dad wanted. If Mom returns the money she stole, I won't press charges. That's the only deal on the table. Daniel's response came immediately. You've changed. You used to care about family. I still care about family, I typed back. That's why I spent 5 years taking care of Dad while you couldn't be bothered to visit. That's why I paid his medical bills when Mom claimed there wasn't enough money, even though she was stealing thousands. Don't talk to me about family, Daniel. You wouldn't know how to be one. I blocked this number too. Daniel had made his choice long ago, siding with Mom because it was easier, because she rewarded him for it. I was done trying to maintain relationships with people who saw me as less than. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept replaying the will reading, Mom's shocked face when Stuart revealed the stolen money, Daniel's uncomfortable silence. But beneath the anxiety was something else. Relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to manage Mom's emotions or anticipate her reactions. I wasn't twisting myself into knots trying to earn scraps of approval. Dad had given me more than money. He'd given me permission to stop trying, to walk away, to choose myself. The next morning, I drove to Dad's house with a locksmith. Stuart had given me the legal go-ahead to secure the property. The locksmith changed all the locks while I walked through the rooms, seeing them with new eyes. This was my house now. Dad's space that he'd left to me. The walls held memories of visits with Dad, quiet afternoons reading together, conversations about life and dreams and regrets. Mom had never really lived here. Dad had bought it before their marriage, and she'd always complained it was too small, too old-fashioned. I found more of Dad's things in the bedroom. A journal tucked in his nightstand drawer. I hesitated before opening it, feeling like an intruder, but then I remembered he'd left me everything. His privacy was now mine to honor or explore. The journal entries from the last year were painful to read. Dad documenting his declining health, his fears about dying, his frustration with Mom's distance. Helen seems relieved I'm sick, one entry read. Like my illness gives her permission to finally stop pretending to care. But the entries about me were different. Olivia came today, brought my favorite soup and sat with me for hours. Didn't try to fix anything, just listened. She's the best thing I ever helped create. My eyes filled with tears, but I kept reading. Dad had noticed everything. My dedication, my love, my patience. And he'd seen Mom's neglect, her focus on appearances over actual care. I'm changing my will tomorrow. Another entry read. Helen doesn't deserve what I've built. Olivia does. My phone rang. Stuart's number. Olivia, your mother's attorney just contacted me. She's filing a will contest on grounds of undue influence. I'd been expecting this, but hearing it still made my stomach drop. What does that mean for the timeline? Stuart's voice was calm. It means things will take longer. But it doesn't change the outcome. Your father's will is solid. Her attorney knows that. This is likely a pressure tactic, trying to force you into a settlement. I'm not settling, I said firmly. Dad wanted me to have his estate. I'm not giving that up because Mom's throwing a tantrum. Stuart sounded pleased. Good. That's what I hoped you'd say. We'll file a response, present our evidence, and let the court see the truth. Your mother's theft of funds actually helps our case. It demonstrates exactly why your father didn't trust her with his estate. After we hung up, I sat in Dad's study, thinking about what lay ahead. A court battle with my mother. Public airing of family dysfunction. Possibly months of legal wrangling. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had Dad's letters, his journal, his love supporting me. I had evidence of Mom's theft and manipulation. And most importantly, I had finally stopped caring what she thought of me. That loss of caring felt like freedom. I spent the rest of the day sorting through Dad's things, separating items to keep from items to donate. His camera collection would stay with me. His books would go to the library. His clothes would go to charity. Practical decisions that felt like honoring him while also making space for my own life in this house. A week passed. Mom's attorney sent formal notice of the will contest. Stuart filed our response, including Dad's letter, the journal entries, and evidence of Mom's financial theft. The legal machinery ground slowly forward. Meanwhile, I started the process of moving into Dad's house. My apartment lease was ending anyway, and living here felt right. Like Dad was still somehow present in the walls and floors and familiar spaces. Angela stopped by one evening with pizza and wine. Mom's support group is imploding, she told me. Half her friends think she's being unreasonable. The other half are trying to stay neutral and not get involved. I took a sip of wine. I don't care what her friends think. I just want this over. Angela studied me. You've changed, Liv. You seem stronger somehow. Less apologetic. I thought about that. Maybe I finally stopped apologizing for existing. The preliminary hearing happened on a gray Tuesday morning. I dressed carefully in a navy suit, wanting to look professional and composed. Stuart met me at the courthouse steps. Remember, he said quietly, stay calm no matter what your mother says. Don't react emotionally. Let the facts speak for themselves. I nodded, my mouth dry with nervousness. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Less dramatic than TV had led me to believe. Mom arrived with her attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Hendricks who'd built a reputation on contentious family cases. Mom wouldn't look at me. She sat ramrod straight, playing the wounded widow perfectly. Daniel wasn't there. I wondered if he'd chosen to distance himself from this fight. The judge, an older man named Harrison, reviewed the filed documents with careful attention. Mrs. Clark, he addressed my mother, you're contesting this will on grounds of undue influence. What evidence supports that claim? Patricia Hendricks stood. Your Honor, my client's husband was terminally ill during the period when he changed his will. He was on significant pain medication, and his daughter had unprecedented access to him during his most vulnerable time. The dramatic shift in his estate planning, cutting out his wife of 30 years, suggests manipulation by someone who stood to gain enormously. Stuart rose to respond. Your Honor, Mr. Clark was evaluated by 2 independent physicians 6 months ago. Both certified his mental capacity was unimpaired. Judge Harrison looked at Mom's attorney. Do you have evidence contradicting those medical evaluations? Patricia hesitated. We're requesting permission to have Mr. Clark's medical records reviewed by our own expert. The judge made a note. Granted. But Ms. Hendricks, I'm looking at a sworn letter from the deceased, written in his own hand, explaining his reasoning for the will's provisions. That's powerful evidence of intent. What do you have to counter it? Patricia shifted strategies. Your Honor, there's also the matter of the estate's value. The $50,000 left to Mrs. Clark is insulting given her 30-year marriage. Community property laws should apply. Stewart stood again. Your Honor, the house was Mr. Clark's separate property, acquired before marriage. The same is true of his primary investment accounts. He had every legal right to dispose of those assets as he chose. The judge nodded. That's established law, Ms. Hendricks. Do you have grounds to challenge the separate property status? I watched Mom's face as her attorney struggled to find solid legal footing. Her confidence was cracking. Judge Harrison continued. I'm also troubled by allegations in the response brief about unauthorized financial transfers. Ms. Hendricks, was your client aware that the estate is pursuing recovery of approximately $100,000 that was moved from Mr. Clark's accounts without proper authorization? Mom leaned forward to whisper urgently to Patricia. Her attorney's expression tightened. Your Honor, those transfers were for legitimate household expenses and medical costs. Stewart pulled out a folder. Your Honor, we have bank records showing the transferred funds sat and used in a separate account. No withdrawals for medical expenses or household bills. The money was simply moved and hidden. Judge Harrison's expression grew stern. Mrs. Clark, did you have your husband's explicit permission to move those funds? Mom's voice wavered slightly when she answered. He gave me access to manage our finances. That's not what I asked, the judge said. Did he specifically authorize those transfers? The silence stretched. Finally, Mom said, he was too sick to handle financial details. I was protecting our assets. Judge Harrison made another note. Protecting them from what, exactly? Mom didn't have a good answer. Stewart seized the moment. Your Honor, Mr. Clark's letter specifically mentions these transfers. He was aware they occurred and stated clearly they were unauthorized. He documented this because he knew his wife might claim otherwise after his death. Patricia tried to recover. Your Honor, my client acted in good faith during an impossibly difficult time. Her husband was dying. She was managing a household alone. These transfers were reasonable actions by a spouse trying to maintain stability. Judge Harrison looked unconvinced. Ms. Hendricks, your client opened a new account at a different bank and moved substantial sums into it while her husband was hospitalized. That doesn't suggest good faith management. That suggests concealment. I felt a surge of vindication watching the judge see through Mom's excuses. Stewart presented more evidence. Page after page of Dad's careful documentation. The journal entries about Mom's neglect. The letters expressing his wishes. The medical evaluations proving his capacity. The bank records showing the unauthorized transfers. It was overwhelming and damning. Patricia Hendricks fought back, but she had nothing solid to work with. Just implications and suggestions and attempts to paint me as manipulative. Judge Harrison finally held up his hand. I've heard enough for today. Here's my preliminary ruling. The will appears valid on its face. Mr. Clark clearly had testamentary capacity. His stated reasons for his choices are documented and rational. Mrs. Clark, your contest will proceed to a full hearing, but I'm warning you now that your case is weak. Unless you can produce compelling new evidence, I'm inclined to uphold the will as written. He paused. Additionally, I'm ordering Mrs. Clark to return the $100,000 transferred from her husband's accounts pending resolution of this matter. Mom's face went white. I can't return money I've already spent, she said. Judge Harrison's expression hardened. Then you shouldn't have spent it, Mrs. Clark. You have 30 days to return those funds or demonstrate with receipts and documentation that they were spent on legitimate estate expenses. If you can't do either, we'll discuss consequences for conversion of estate assets. The gavel came down. The hearing was over. Stewart gathered his papers, looking satisfied. That went very well, he murmured. Outside the courthouse, Mom confronted me on the steps. You're destroying this family, she hissed, her careful composure finally cracking. Everything I did was to protect us, And you're turning it into some kind of witch hunt. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but tired pity. You stole from Dad while he was dying. You tried to cut me out of his funeral. You've spent my entire life making me feel worthless. And you think I'm the one destroying the family? Mom's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time. I'm your mother. How can you do this to me? Her voice broke on the last word. For a second, I almost wavered. Decades of conditioning screamed at me to comfort her, to apologize, to make peace. But then I remembered Dad's letters, his journal entries, his deliberate choice to protect me from exactly this manipulation. You stopped being my mother the day you told me I didn't contribute enough. Actually, you stopped being my mother long before that. Patricia Hendricks stepped between us. Mrs. Clark, don't say anything else. Let's go. She practically dragged Mom toward her car. I watched them leave, feeling like a weight had lifted from my chest. Stuart came up beside me. You okay? He asked. I took a deep breath of cool autumn air. Yeah, I really am. And I was. For the first time in my life, I'd stood my ground against Mom without crumbling, without apologizing, without backing down. That evening, I got a call from Daniel. Liv, I was at Mom's house today. She's falling apart. Can't you just give her something? Enough to make this stop. I leaned against Dad's kitchen counter. She can have what Dad left her. $50,000 and whatever she can prove she spent legitimately from the money she stole. That's more than generous given what she did. Daniel sighed. She's our mother. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It used to, I said honestly. But she made it very clear at Dad's funeral that I'm not really part of this family. She uninvited me from my own father's goodbye, Daniel. She told everyone I didn't contribute enough when I'm the one who took care of Dad for 5 years. So no, being my mother doesn't earn her special treatment anymore. She lost that when she chose cruelty over decency. Daniel was quiet. I didn't know how bad it was. Between you two, I mean. I almost laughed. You didn't know because you were never around. You got all of Mom's love and attention while I got criticism and contempt. You never had to fight for scraps of approval. So don't tell me now about family loyalty when you've never had to earn it the way I did. Daniel's voice was small when he replied. I'm sorry, Liv. I should have noticed. I should have stood up for you. It was the first real apology he'd ever given me. Thanks for saying that, I said. But it doesn't change what I have to do now. After hanging up, I walked through Dad's house, turning on lights in every room. This was my space now. My home. A place where I could breathe without constantly managing someone else's emotions. I thought about what Dad had written in one letter. Home should be where you feel safest, not where you feel smallest. For the first time in 33 years, I was building a home where I could be fully myself. No apologies. No seringking. Just me. 2 weeks later, Stuart called with news. Your mother's attorney reached out. They want to discuss a settlement. I'd been expecting this. The judge's preliminary ruling had made it clear Mom's case was weak. What are they offering? Stuart's tone was neutral. Your mother would drop the will contest. In exchange, you'd agree to give her an additional $100,000 from the estate and not pursue recovery of the stolen funds. I did quick math in my head. That would leave me with roughly $200,000 after taxes and expenses, plus the house. Still life-changing money, but less than Dad had intended. What do you think I should do? Stuart's response was careful. That's not my decision, Olivia. But I'll tell you what the practical considerations are. If you settle, this ends now. No more court appearances, no more stress. If you fight, you'll almost certainly win, but it could take months and cost legal fees. You'd also have to endure more of your mother's hostility. I thought about Dad's letter. His explicit wish that I receive his estate. His documentation of Mom's theft. His clear intent to provide for me, not her. No settlement, I said firmly. Dad knew what he was doing. He didn't want Mom to have more than he left her. I'm not going to override his wishes because she's making a fuss. Stuart sounded pleased. I was hoping you'd say that. I'll inform her attorney that we're proceeding to trial. The full hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, I focused on settling into the house and processing my grief. Without Mom's drama constantly demanding attention, I finally had space to properly mourn Dad. I went through his photos, his books, his lifetime of accumulated memories. I cried over pictures of us together, over his handwritten notes in the margins of his favorite novels, over the sheer enormity of losing him. But I also celebrated him. I framed my favorite photo of us and hung it in the living room. I read his letters over and over, absorbing his love and wisdom. Angela visited often, bringing groceries and company. Mom's not taking the rejection of her settlement well, Angela reported. She's telling everyone you're being vindictive and cruel. I shrugged. Let her tell whatever story she needs. People who matter know the truth. Angela smiled. You know what's funny? Half the family is quietly rooting for you. They're tired of your mom's drama. They just won't say so publicly. That surprised me. I'd assumed I was alone in this fight. One evening, I got an unexpected visitor. Mr. Stevens, Dad's old business partner, knocked on the door. Olivia, he said warmly, I wanted to stop by. Your father would be proud of how you're handling all this. We sat in the living room drinking coffee, while Mr. Stevens shared stories about Dad. Marcus talked about you constantly, he said. About how strong you were, how resilient. He worried that Helen had beaten you down over the years, but he always said you had steel in you. Looks like he was right. Mr. Stevens pulled an envelope from his jacket. Your dad gave me this a month before he died. Asked me to give it to you if Helen tried to cause trouble. Inside was another letter, dated just weeks before Dad's death. Livy, it read. If you're reading this, your mother is probably making your life hell. Don't give in. Don't back down. You're stronger than you know. And you deserve everything I'm leaving you. The money matters less than the principle. Stand firm. Make her face consequences for once. I love you, Dad. I wiped tears from my eyes. Even at the very end, Dad had been thinking about me, protecting me, giving me the strength to fight. Mr. Stevens patted my hand. If you need anything, Olivia, anything at all, call me. Your father was like a brother to me. That makes you family. After he left, I sat holding Dad's final letter, feeling his presence surrounding me. I wasn't fighting this battle alone. Dad's love was still here, still supporting me, still reminding me of my worth. The trial began on a cold November morning. The courtroom was fuller this time. A few family members had come to watch, though I noticed most sat on my side of the aisle rather than Mom's. Daniel was there, looking uncomfortable, sitting alone in a middle row like he couldn't decide which side to support. Judge Harrison called the court to order and Patricia Hendricks began her case. She painted Mom as a devoted wife blindsided by a will that betrayed 30 years of marriage. Your Honor, Patricia said, Helen Clark dedicated her life to her family. She raised 2 children, supported her husband through career changes and health crises, and maintained their home. To be left with a mere $50,000 after 3 decades is unconscionable. It suggests undue influence by a daughter who manipulated a dying man. Stewart let her speak without objection. He'd explained this strategy to me. Let them present their weak case first. Then we'll dismantle it with facts. Patricia called Mom to the stand. Under direct examination, Mom played her role perfectly. She described her devotion to Dad, her shock at the will, her belief that I'd manipulated him during his illness. Olivia was always there, Mom said, her voice trembling. Always pushing for more time alone with Marcus. She'd send me away, tell me I was upsetting him. She controlled his environment completely. It was a clever twist on the truth. Yes, I'd been there constantly. But I'd never sent Mom away. She'd simply never bothered to come. Stewart's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Clark, how many times did you visit your husband during his final hospitalization? Mom hesitated. I visited regularly. Stewart pulled out hospital visitor logs. According to these records, you signed in 12 times during a 6-week period. Your daughter signed in 43 times. Does that sound like someone controlling access, or someone simply being present when you chose not to be? Mom's expression tightened. I had responsibilities at home. Stewart continued relentlessly. What responsibilities? Your husband was dying in the hospital. What was more important than being with him? Mom stumbled over her answer. There were bills to pay, arrangements to make. Stuart pulled out bank statements. Speaking of bills, can you explain these 3 large transfers from your husband's account to your personal account during that same period? Mom's face flushed. Those were for expenses. Stuart handed copies to the judge. The account shows no subsequent withdrawals. The money just sat there. That doesn't suggest expenses. That suggests hiding assets. Patricia objected, trying to redirect, but the damage was done. Stuart called his witnesses next. Dad's doctors testified about his clear mental state 6 months ago when he'd changed the will. Mr. Stevens spoke about Dad's concerns regarding Mom's spending and her emotional distance. Angela testified about Mom's favoritism toward Daniel and her dismissive treatment of me. Each witness built the picture of a man who'd made rational, deliberate choices about his estate based on years of observation. The medical expert Mom's attorney had hired tried to suggest Dad's pain medication could have affected his judgment. But under cross-examination, Stuart got the expert to admit that the medications Dad was on 6 months ago were minimal and wouldn't have impaired his decision-making capacity. So you're saying Mr. Clark was perfectly capable of understanding his choices when he executed this will? Stuart asked. The expert had to agree. Yes, based on the timeline, his capacity appears intact. Stuart's final witness was me. I'd been dreading this moment, but I was ready. Patricia Hendricks tried to paint me as a conniving daughter who'd isolated Dad from his wife. But I answered each question calmly, with facts. I visited my father every Sunday for 5 years. I took him to medical appointments. I paid for medications when insurance denied coverage. I didn't manipulate him. I loved him. When Patricia asked why Dad had left me everything, I looked directly at the judge. Because he knew I cared about him, not his money. Stuart's direct examination gave me space to explain the relationship. How Mom had always favored Daniel. How she'd dismissed my efforts to help. How Dad had noticed and appreciated my care. My father left me his estate because he wanted to make sure I was taken care of. Not because I manipulated him, but because he loved me and knew I loved him back. I pulled out Dad's letters. These are letters my father wrote explaining his decisions. They show exactly why he made the choices he did. Judge Harrison read through Dad's letters carefully. When he finished, he looked at Mom with something like disappointment. Mrs. Clark, these letters paint a very different picture than your testimony suggests. Your husband describes years of emotional distance on your part and consistent care from your daughter. His reasoning for his will seems thoughtful and deliberate. Mom opened her mouth to protest, but Patricia put a hand on her arm. The trial wrapped up with closing arguments, but the outcome already felt inevitable. Judge Harrison took 3 days to issue his ruling. When Stuart called to tell me the decision was ready, my hands shook as I drove to the courthouse. Mom was already there with Patricia, both looking tense. Daniel had come too, sitting several rows back. Judge Harrison entered and we all stood. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony, he began. This is a case of a man who made clear, documented choices about how to distribute his estate after death. Those choices may seem harsh to some, but they were his to make. The judge continued. Mr. Clark left detailed explanations for his decisions. He was evaluated and found mentally competent. His stated concerns about his wife's behavior are supported by evidence, including unauthorized financial transfers totaling nearly $100,000. There is no credible evidence of undue influence. The will stands as written. Mom made a small sound, like she'd been struck. Patricia's expression remained professionally neutral, but I could see the defeat in her eyes. Judge Harrison wasn't finished. Additionally, Mrs. Clark is ordered to return the $100,000 she removed from her husband's accounts, plus interest, within 90 days. Your Honor, Patricia stood. My client has already spent a significant portion of those funds. She doesn't have the means to return the full amount immediately. Judge Harrison's expression was stern. Then she'll need to make arrangements. Payment plan, loan, liquidation of personal assets. I don't particularly care how, but those funds belong to the estate and will be returned. If Mrs. Clark cannot comply, I'll consider further remedies including potential criminal charges for theft of estate assets. Mom stood abruptly. This is wrong. All of this is wrong. Judge Harrison looked at her directly. Mrs. Clark, your husband documented your financial impropriety. He explained his reasoning for his will. He was of sound mind and had every legal right to distribute his property as he saw fit. The only wrong here is your attempt to override his clearly stated wishes. Mom turned and fled the courtroom, Patricia hurrying after her. I sat very still, letting the victory sink in. Stuart squeezed my shoulder. It's over, Olivia. You won. Outside, Daniel approached me hesitantly. Liv, can we talk? I looked at him. This brother I'd once tried so hard to impress and connect with. I don't know that we have much to say to each other, Daniel. He shifted his weight. I just want you to know I get it now. Why Dad did what he did. I wasn't there for him. I was barely there for anyone but myself. And Mom, she's not handling any of this well. I'm starting to see how toxic she's been. To you especially. It was progress, I suppose, but too little too late. I appreciate you saying that. But Daniel, where were you when I needed someone to stand up for me? Where were you during all those family dinners when Mom compared me to you and found me lacking? Where were you during Dad's illness? Daniel looked at the ground. I was taking the easy road. I know that now. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but pushed it aside. Well, now you know what the hard road looks like. It's the one I've been walking my whole life. I started to leave, but Daniel called after me. For what it's worth, I'm not contesting the will. Whatever Dad left me, I'll accept. I won't fight you on this. I turned back. He left you his car, Daniel. That's it. And honestly, that's more than you probably deserved given how little time you spent with him. Daniel flinched but nodded. I know. We stood there in awkward silence until I finally said, I need to go. Take care of yourself, Daniel. It felt like goodbye, and maybe it was. The weeks following the trial were strangely peaceful. Without Mom's constant drama and legal battles consuming my energy, I could finally focus on building my own life. I'd quit my job at the marketing firm where I'd worked for years, using some of the inheritance to give myself time to figure out what I really wanted to do. Dad's $10,000 for therapy was being well spent. I'd found a counselor, Dr. Martinez, who specialized in family trauma and narcissistic parent dynamics. You've spent your whole life trying to earn something that was never available, Dr. Martinez explained during one session. Your mother's approval, her love. But people like your mother don't actually have that to give. They're too focused on their own needs, their own narrative, to genuinely see and value others. Hearing a professional validate what I'd always felt was both painful and liberating. So it was never about me being good enough? I asked. No. Dr. Martinez said gently. It was about her being incapable of giving what you needed. I started building new relationships and strengthening old ones. Angela became a regular presence in my life, stopping by for coffee or inviting me to family events on her side of the family. I reconnected with college friends I'd lost touch with, people who'd drifted away during the years I'd been consumed with trying to be the perfect daughter. I took up photography seriously, using Dad's camera equipment to capture the world the way he'd taught me. Each click of the shutter felt like honoring his memory while also creating something new in mine. The house slowly transformed from Dad's space into my own. I kept his study exactly as it was, a shrine to his memory. But the rest of the house I gradually updated. New paint in the living room. Modern furniture mixing with Dad's antiques. A garden in the backyard where I planted flowers and vegetables. It became a home that reflected both where I'd come from and where I was going. A home where I felt safe and valued and free. Mom made one last attempt to contact me. A letter arrived 3 months after the trial, her handwriting on the envelope making my stomach clench. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. Inside was a single page. Olivia, it read. I don't understand how we got here. I'm your mother. I gave you life. I raised you. And you've destroyed my security, my peace, my relationship with your father's memory. I'll never forgive you for this betrayal. Helen. No apology. No acknowledgement of her own actions. Just blame and accusation. I showed the letter to Dr. Martinez at our next session. How does this make you feel? She asked. I thought about it. Sad maybe, but also free. She's given me permission to let go. If she'll never forgive me for standing up for myself, then I don't have to keep hoping she'll change. Dr. Martinez nodded. That's growth, Olivia. Accepting that some relationships can't be salvaged and being okay with that. I went home and put Mom's letter with all the other documents from this saga. Then I closed the box and put it in storage. Acknowledged but no longer actively consuming my energy. 6 months after the trial, I used part of the inheritance to open a small photography studio downtown. Clark Creative Photography, specialized in portraits and family photos. There was something healing about helping other families capture moments of genuine connection and joy. My work became an unexpected form of therapy, showing me what healthy families looked like, and reminding me that my dysfunctional upbringing wasn't the only model that existed. Business was good. Word of mouth brought steady clients. I hired an assistant, a young woman named Maya, fresh out of art school with incredible talent and enthusiasm. She reminded me a bit of myself at that age, hungry to prove herself and eager to create. We worked well together, and having an employee gave me a sense of pride I'd never felt in my corporate marketing job. This was something I'd built from the ground up. Something that was entirely mine. I also started a small scholarship fund at the local community college in Dad's name. The Marcus Clark Memorial Scholarship for Nontraditional Students gave $5,000 annually to students over 30 returning to school. It felt like the right way to honor Dad's belief in second chances and new beginnings. The first recipient was a single mother of 3 studying nursing. At the award ceremony, she thanked me with tears in her eyes. This means I can quit my second job and focus on my kids and my classes. You've changed my life. Dad would have loved that. Angela called one evening with unexpected news. Mom's moving to Arizona. Living with Aunt Rachel apparently. She can't afford to stay here after paying back the estate funds. I felt a complicated swirl of emotions. Relief that Mom would be physically distant. Sad satisfaction that she was facing consequences. Guilt that I felt satisfaction. How is she? I asked, not entirely sure why I cared. Angela paused. Bitter. Angry. Convinced she's the victim. But also maybe a little broken. This whole thing really shattered her self-image. I thought about that after we hung up. Part of me wanted to feel bad for Mom. Wanted to reach out and offer some kind of reconciliation. But the healthier part of me, the part that had grown through therapy and grief and hard-won self-respect, knew that reaching out would just invite more toxicity into my life. Some relationships weren't meant to be repaired. Some people weren't capable of the introspection and change necessary for real healing. Mom was one of those people. Accepting that was its own kind of freedom. Daniel sent me a Christmas card that year. Inside was a simple note. Thinking of you. Hope you're well. D. I appreciated the gesture, small as it was. I sent him one back with a photo I'd taken of winter trees covered in snow, one of Dad's favorite subjects. Maybe someday Daniel and I could rebuild some kind of relationship. Or maybe not. Either way, I was learning that I didn't need my family's validation to feel whole. I had built my own life, my own meaning, my own worth. And that was enough. The first anniversary of Dad's death arrived with unexpected gentleness. I'd been dreading it, expecting a flood of grief to pull me under. Instead, I felt mostly peaceful. I drove to the cemetery in the morning, bringing white roses just like the ones I'd carried to his funeral. The ones Mom had never let me deliver. This time no one stopped me. I laid them on his grave and sat in the grass beside the headstone. Hey Dad, I said quietly, feeling slightly silly talking to a piece of marble but needing to say the words anyway. I did what you asked. I stood firm. I didn't let Mom bully me into giving up what you wanted me to have. It was hard. Really hard. But I'm okay now. Better than okay. I'm building something good, something that would make you proud. A breeze rustled through the trees, and I chose to believe it was Dad's way of saying he heard me, that he was proud. I stayed for an hour, telling Dad about the photography studio, about the scholarship fund, about how I was learning to live without constantly seeking approval from people who'd never really see me. You saw me though, I told the headstone. You always saw me. And that's going to have to be enough. When I finally stood to leave, I felt lighter. The grief was still there, would always be there in some form, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. I could carry it while also carrying joy and hope and plans for the future. That evening, I hosted a small gathering at the house. Angela came with her partner. Mr. Stevens stopped by with his wife. Maya brought her girlfriend. We shared a meal, told stories about Dad, celebrated his life and his memory. It was the funeral gathering that should have happened a year ago. Surrounded by people who genuinely cared about Dad, and who genuinely cared about me, I finally felt like I'd properly said goodbye. Not the goodbye Mom had stolen from me, but one on my own terms, filled with love instead of drama. After everyone left, I sat in Dad's study with his journal, reading entries at random. One caught my attention. Olivia doesn't realize how strong she is yet. Helen has convinced her she's weak, dependent, less than. But I see the steel in her. She's going to be remarkable once she stops trying to shrink herself to fit Helen's narrow view. I hope I live long enough to see it. But even if I don't, I know she'll find her way. She's my daughter. Strong runs in our blood. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. Dad had seen me, had believed in me, had given me the tools to find my strength even after he was gone. His greatest gift wasn't the money or the house. It was his unwavering faith that I was enough, exactly as I was. That belief had carried me through the darkest year of my life. And it would carry me forward into whatever came next. Life settled into a new normal. The studio thrived, my client base growing through referrals and positive reviews. I discovered I had a particular talent for photographing families in transition, adoptions, blended families, chosen families that didn't fit traditional molds. Maybe because I understood what it was like to build family outside of blood ties. My work became known for capturing genuine emotion, the messy, real, beautiful complexity of human connection. It felt meaningful in a way my corporate job never had. I started dating again cautiously. There was a man named Thomas who came into the studio looking for someone to photograph his new coffee shop for a website. He was kind, funny, completely emotionally available in a way I wasn't entirely used to. We went on a few dates. Nothing serious yet, but promising. He knew about my family situation, how I'd had to fight for my inheritance. Instead of being scared off by the drama, he admired how I'd stood up for myself. That takes real courage, he'd said over dinner one night. Not everyone can set boundaries with their parents. Dr. Martinez and I had moved to bi-weekly sessions instead of weekly. I was healing, processing, growing. You're building a life based on your own values now, she observed during one session. Instead of trying to meet someone else's impossible standards. How does that feel? I thought about it. Scary sometimes, but mostly really good. Like I'm finally living my actual life instead of performing a role in someone else's story. She smiled. That's the work, Olivia. Becoming the protagonist of your own narrative instead of a supporting character in theirs. The photography studio allowed me to give back in ways I'd never anticipated. I started offering free family portrait sessions to families experiencing hardship, domestic violence survivors starting over, foster families, LGBTQ+ couples who'd been rejected by traditional family photographers. Each session reminded me that family was complicated and messy, and sometimes chosen rather than given. That love came in many forms. That my story of family dysfunction and ultimate liberation wasn't unique, but it also wasn't the only story I'd get to tell. Maya had become not just an employee but a genuine friend. She knew about my history with Mom, had listened without judgment as I'd processed the trauma and anger and eventual acceptance. One day, working late at the studio, she asked, "Do you ever regret fighting for the inheritance? Like, was it worth all the pain?" I thought about Dad's letters, the house that had become my sanctuary, the freedom to pursue meaningful work. Every single day I'm grateful I fought, I told her. Not because of the money, because I finally chose myself over someone else's comfort. That changed everything. 2 years after Dad's death, I received an unexpected letter from Daniel. He'd been in therapy himself, working through his own issues with Mom's favoritism and his complicity in the family dynamics. "I'm starting to understand how much damage Mom did to both of us," he wrote. "It looked different for each of us, but it was damage nonetheless. I know I can't undo the past or make up for not standing up for you. But I want you to know I'm trying to be a better person, a better brother. If you're ever willing to talk, I'd like that. No pressure. Just hope. Daniel." I held the letter for a long time, considering. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep Daniel firmly in my past along with Mom, and all the pain of childhood. But another part recognized the courage it took for him to reach out, to acknowledge his role in our dysfunction. I wrote back. Nothing effusive, just a simple, "I'm open to coffee sometime. Let me know when you're in town." It felt like leaving a door open without rushing through it. Progress at my own pace. Daniel visited a month later. We met at a neutral cafe downtown, neither of us quite sure how to begin. He looked different, older, more serious. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," he said, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I wasn't sure you would." We talked carefully at first, feeling out the boundaries of this new relationship. He told me about therapy, about starting to recognize how Mom had pitted us against each other, used him to diminish me. "I thought I was the lucky one," he admitted, getting all her attention and approval. But it was suffocating in its own way. I found myself softening slightly as he spoke. Daniel had been damaged too, just differently. Mom's excessive attention had come with strings, with expectations, with the constant pressure to be perfect. Where I'd been neglected, he'd been smothered. Neither was healthy. "I'm not ready to be close," I told him honestly. "But I'm willing to try being friendly. See where it goes." Daniel nodded. "That's more than fair. I'll take friendly." It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, but it was something. A small bridge being tentatively constructed across years of dysfunction. We started meeting for coffee every few months. Nothing deep, just slow steps toward rebuilding some version of a sibling relationship. Daniel told me about his life, his struggles with anxiety and perfectionism, his growing understanding that Mom's vision of him had never been about him at all, just about her need to have a perfect son to show off. I told him about the studio, about finding work that felt meaningful, about learning to value myself outside of family dynamics. It wasn't the close sibling bond some people had, but it was honest. And that mattered more than closeness built on dysfunction. One day, Daniel asked about the house. "Do you ever think about selling it? Starting completely fresh?" I shook my head. Dad left it to me because he knew I'd value it. It's become my sanctuary, the first place I've ever lived where I felt completely myself. I'm not giving that up. Daniel nodded slowly. "I'm glad. For what it's worth, I think Dad made the right choice. With everything. You were the one who deserved it." Coming from Daniel, those words meant something. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. And that was enough. 3 years after the funeral, I got word through Angela that Mom had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. Aunt Rachel in Arizona was struggling to care for her. Daniel called to discuss it. "Rachel's asking if we can help, financially or otherwise." I felt that old pull, the ingrained obligation to drop everything and fix things. But I'd learned to recognize that impulse for what it was, conditioning, not genuine responsibility. "What does Mom need?" I asked carefully. Daniel explained. "Better care facility, consistent medical attention, someone to manage her affairs. It would cost money and time. Rachel thinks we should split the costs. You, me, and her kids." I took a deep breath, checking in with my feelings. "I'll contribute financially. 25% of costs, same as any other family member. But I won't visit, and I won't be involved in her day-to-day care. I've made my peace with keeping my distance." Daniel was quiet. "That seems fair. More fair than I expected, honestly." I sent monthly checks to Aunt Rachel to help with Mom's care. It felt like the right balance, acknowledging she was still my mother in a biological sense while maintaining the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. Dr. Martinez supported the decision. "You're taking responsibility without sacrificing your well-being. That's mature boundary setting." Some family members thought I was cold for not visiting. Angela defended me. Olivia's doing more than Helen deserves after what she put her through. Financial support is generous. Part of me wondered if I'd regret not making peace with Mom before dementia took her memories entirely. But the healthier part of me recognized that the version of Mom I'd wanted to make peace with had never actually existed. I'd wanted a mother who could acknowledge her mistakes, apologize for the cruelty, see me clearly. But that wasn't who Mom was, even before the dementia. Making peace with that reality was more valuable than forcing a deathbed reconciliation that would have been hollow and false. I focused instead on the family I was building. Thomas and I had gotten serious. He'd met my chosen family at the studio, attended dinners at my house, heard all the stories about Dad. He understood why I was careful about commitment, why trust came slowly. He was patient with my healing, never pushing, always supportive. "I love the person you're becoming," he told me one evening. "Strong and kind and unafraid to stand up for yourself. That's incredibly attractive." It was the first time someone had loved me for my strength instead of my compliance. 5 years after Dad's death, I stood in my photography studio looking at a gallery wall I'd created. Photos of families laughing, couples embracing, children playing. Evidence of love in its many forms. Above them hung a portrait Maya had taken of me in Dad's study, surrounded by his books and cameras, looking confident and at peace. I barely recognized the woman in that photo as the same person who'd stood on the funeral home steps 5 years ago, humiliated and broken. The studio had expanded to include a second photographer and a full-time assistant beyond Maya. We'd won local awards, been featured in regional magazines. More importantly, we'd helped hundreds of families capture moments they'd treasure forever. The scholarship fund had grown too, now supporting 3 students annually. Dad's legacy wasn't just in what he'd left me materially, but in what I'd built with it. Something that honored his memory, while also being uniquely mine. My relationship with Daniel had evolved into genuine friendship. We met regularly now, talked honestly about our childhoods, and the healing we were both doing. He'd stood up to Mom before the dementia got bad, had told her that her treatment of me had been wrong. She'd denied it, of course, rewritten history to make herself the victim. But Daniel's willingness to speak the truth had mattered to me. It showed he'd genuinely changed, genuinely understood. Our relationship would never be what it could have been if we'd had a different childhood, but it was real and valuable in its own right. Thomas and I had gotten engaged 6 months ago. The proposal had been simple and perfect. In Dad's study, surrounded by the books and memories that had shaped me. "I love you for exactly who you are," Thomas had said, "including all the scars and strength that came from your journey." We were planning a small wedding at the house, just close friends and chosen family. No big production, no drama. Just honest celebration of love and commitment. The kind of family event Dad would have appreciated. I thought often about that moment on the funeral home steps. How devastated I'd felt, how small and invisible. Mom's words, "You didn't contribute enough," had been meant to destroy me. Instead, they'd catalyzed the biggest transformation of my life. They'd forced me to stop seeking approval from someone incapable of giving it, and start building my own sense of worth. In trying to diminish me, Mom had accidentally set me free. There was irony in that, painful and perfect. Dad's letters stayed in my desk drawer, read and reread whenever I needed reminding of my value. His words had carried me through the darkest times. "You're strong. You deserve better. Don't let her make you forget your worth." He'd given me more than an inheritance. He'd given me permission to choose myself, to fight for what was right, to build a life based on my own values instead of someone else's impossible standards. That was the real legacy. Not the money or the house, though those had helped. But the belief that I was enough, exactly as I was. I locked up the studio that evening and drove home through the autumn twilight. The house looked warm and welcoming, lights glowing in the windows, Thomas's car in the driveway. My home. My life. Built on the foundation Dad had provided, but shaped entirely by my own choices and effort. As I walked up the steps, not funeral home steps where I'd been rejected, but my own front steps where I was always welcome, I felt profound gratitude. Not for the pain I'd endured, but for the strength I'd discovered. For the life I'd claimed. For the woman I'd become when I finally stopped trying to earn love from people who couldn't give it, and started giving it to myself instead. The girl who'd been turned away from her father's funeral was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, protected her peace, and built her own meaning. A woman who'd taken betrayal and transformed it into liberation. A woman who'd finally learned the most important lesson. That the best revenge wasn't hurting those who'd hurt you. It was building something so beautiful, so authentic, so genuinely yours that their opinions stopped mattering entirely. That was freedom. That was victory. That was the life Dad had wanted for me all along. And standing in the doorway of my home, surrounded by love I'd chosen and earned, I'd finally claimed it.